Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming for my session. My name is Tobiasz Koprowski. I'm Polish and I'm based in UK now. I moved to UK a few weeks ago. And my session will be about the SQL security in the cloud. And it will be some of my experience with the SQL Server from my work in the data center in Poland for many years, and SQL Azure, and compatibility and non-compatibility things with the security about the clouds and data inside the Azure platform. I hope that, yeah. About me, it's not very important, maybe just Twitter. If you use the Twitter, you can follow me or send some of the opinions about my session, and you can connect me with the Twitter after session. I have 4 points for my session. It will be a little bit introduction about the security, short remembering about the SQL Server security best practices, SQL Server 2014 security enhancement, just the 5 things which are important for the SQL Server 2014, and what the security works inside the cloud, inside the Azure platform, summary, appendix, some links, and so on. In your opinion, what is the security? What is this? What is the security? It will be really great if you can talk with me, because maybe we can share our experience between different people, different companies. What is the security in your opinion? Is it important or not? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah? Okay, security. It's not only the people, it's just the systems, companies, some of the infected, access, user structures, and many things. How we can provide security in our environment? How you provide the security in your SQL Server environment? Which part of tools are you use?
Are we talking about authentication, encryption?
Something like that, yes, okay. Something more? It's just on the SQL Server level or maybe of the physical levels? Yeah, we have a data in our environment. Come on. We have data in our environment. We can use some of the encryption. We can use lockers. Of course, it's not perfect secured. And our data can be stored anywhere in the world, especially with the Azure platform. Did you saw the presentation of Nigel Ellis about SQL Azure Database? Yeah? Where the data are stored inside the Azure? In which place in the world? If we use the geolocation, generally in every places, yes, in every continent, every data centers. Okay, so what is this, the security? I found some of the methodologies, the ISECOM. So the security provides a form of protection where a separation is created between the assets and the threats. So what is the assets with our SQL Server environment? The data, yes. What is the threats? Which kind of threats we can find if you start to protect our data to the threats? What kind of threats you can find in your environment? Who can make something bad for you? Hackers? Yeah? Maybe internal users? Is internal users are dangerous? A little bit, yes. I'll show you something in a moment. I found some of the categorizing of the security. From the IT realm, we can, and there are links for the Wikipedia, of course, and a lot of information about this kind of security: application security, computing security, data security, information security, and network security, okay, from the IT realm. If we look for the physical realm, we have more securities. You know, the airport security is increasing. I hear that a few days ago, one of my colleagues sent a tweet that he must put off all the phones from the pockets and from the jackets on this crossing the security border in the airport. Another security thing which came on the airport security. Food security, home security, physical security, and more. We also have a political realm with the security things. Homeland security, human security, international security, national security, public security. What do you think? Which kind of these security aspects are connected with our SQL Server environment? I choose a few of them. Maybe you can agree with that, maybe not. Like application security, of course, from the application. Computing security, data security, information. Is the home security connected with SQL Server or not? How often you work from home? Many times, yes? So if we work from home, having the security or safety place at home, it's important for us. Yes, of course, physical security, national security, and so on. About one aspect about our threats. Do you know Snowden? Who is there? Who is the Snowden? I'll try to find because I cannot switch on my laptop. Who is the Snowden? I'll show you some of the part of the interview. It's just 2 minutes.
I'm interested in the fact that earlier today, Deputy Secretary Carter said that called it a major mistake to put such large pools of information together while giving access to that information inside the NSA to a far wider variety of people than may have happened a generation ago. That's what I guess some people call the insider threat or the insider cyber threat. You addressed that briefly earlier, but how big is that threat both inside the government and in corporate America? And what, can you give us a little more detail about your efforts to fix it? And finally, why is that threat still in place after Buckshot Yankee and the WikiLeaks earlier?
Well, so each one's slightly different. Starting at your last question first. This leaker was a system administrator who was trusted with moving information to actually make sure the right information was on the SharePoint servers that NSA Hawaii needed. A huge break in trust and confidence.
Just all. In fact, the Snowden moved data from one location to the another location, the data which are stored officially, normally on the SharePoint environment, moved and take this data on the time of moving. And next, they use the data. How we can prevent this story and what we can do to prevent these things, like Snowden acts. Best practices for the SQL Server. Efficiency and security have an inverse relationship to another. You can have high efficiency or high security, but not to both. Is it true, in your opinion? Can we have a high performance, high efficiency, and high security together? Yeah, generally yes. Depends on money. Yeah, depends on our budget. For example, the small bank company have a cost limitation, risk, personal limitations, and regulatory emphasis. Which of these four could be more, in fact, more important in your company, for example? Cost? Are the costs important? Which is most important, cost or risk? It depends, yes? It depends, of course. Okay, we can use authentication. SQL Server supports Windows Authentication Mode with the Kerberos and NTLM, of course, and mixed mode authentication, which support Windows accounts and SQL Server specific accounts. Which kind of authentication we normally use? Windows authentication, yes? How often do you use SQL authentication?
It depends.
Yeah? Depends on what?
In which century my customer lives.
Yeah, for example, okay. So the best practice for this, it could be use Windows Authentication Mode unless legacy application required mixed authentication for backward compatibility. Yes, okay. Secure sysadmin account. Sysadmin account, like SA, is the most vulnerable account for everybody knows this. Are you use SA account normally in your company, in your environment? Maybe not sure, maybe yes, maybe not. Some of my customers use SA by default. Of course, it's the potential SQL Server attackers and risk for attackers because they know that SA is very important account. How we can prevent this? We can change the name of sysadmin account after installation, for example. How many of you changed the SA account after installation? Okay, why you do that? Because of the hackers, for example, yes, okay. Some of you, yes, change the accounts. Complex passwords. How about passwords? It's from December. It's of course, you can find in the website a lot of articles about this. How about passwords? Are the passwords secure? Of course not. Is any of your users use this kind of passwords? Yes. Users, yes. Maybe not you as administrator, but users very often. If we create a password which is complicated, we can use password generator, of course, and we can create a very hard to hack passwords, very complex passwords. What the users will do with this password? They put just the sticker on the desk, and they will use this, of course. So best practice, ensure that complex passwords are used for SA and other SQL Server specific account logins. You can think about the enforced expiration and must change for any new SQL login. Have you ever used enforced expiration passwords for SQL Server environment? Yeah, we can use, of course, we can, if we use domain accounts, it's easier, yes, because it comes from the domain account. How about specific logins? If we work with our SQL Server environment, which account are you use for working with the environment? Are you use the different accounts for different SQL Server services? For example, engine, agent, SSIS, maybe other service application, or just used by default? Which account are you use? Some of my customers use, because we can install everything by default, just next. SQL Server provide this functionality to install everything by default. And this is the by default, the accounts about which looks when we install by default. Which kind of accounts should we use for increasing our security for SQL Server? We should use the admin account, Active Directory accounts, different accounts for different services. And of course, different passwords for different accounts. It's a very good idea. Okay. Sysadmin membership group. Member of sysadmin fixed role can do whatever they want on SQL Server. How often you look for the sysadmin membership group? How often you look for the groups and privileges inside the SQL Server? So we can by default, sysadmin fixed role has a control server permission granted explicitly, so we can prevent the access for our data with make some changes. For example, carefully choosing the membership of the sysadmin fixed role, using the right logins only, not logins which came to this group by default. With general administration, everything, almost always, everything works under SA account. So if we install SQL Server environment and we use the highest level of privileges of our account, probably everything will work in our SQL Server, but it's not good for the security. We should use as less possible privileges for our accounts, so we can dedicate Windows logins for DBAs, and of course assign these logins with sysadmin rights on our SQL Server. So we can use built-in fixed role and database roles for create custom roles, and they apply for the specific logins. Is everything which I talk about now, it's just the normal things for DBAs? Everybody knows about that? Yeah, generally it's okay, but everybody use? No, not always, not always. How about guest access? How often you revoke the guest access for the SQL Server? We have a guest account on each databases, yes, by default. Have you ever do something with this account? So we can, for example, disable all guest user accounts from all user and system databases, excluding MSDB, of course, because we need to access for the schema, for example, but we should revoke guest access for our environment. Limit public permission. How many accounts have access for the with the public permission in our SQL Server environment? What do you think? How many accounts? If we have, yes, please? All, almost all, yes. So SQL Server has many, of course, stored procedures, and many of them have a public access permission by default. Here is just the simple part of this procedures. We can find more procedures, and all of these have a public permission access. So if someone know how to use the stored procedures, they can get some, for example, data, or they can make something bad in our environment, for example, shutting down or something like that. So best practice, revoke public role access for some extended procedures and check the other stored procedures. Hardening SQL Server ports. Of course, by default, 1433, default port of SQL Server. How many of you changed the port? Okay, why you changed this port? For security, of course. Okay, and some other people which you never changed this port, why you use the default port? Yes, it was choice. Yeah. Yes. Yes, if we change, for example, the default port and we must inform all of our customers and so on, it's costly. Again, yes? But of course, we should change the default SQL Server port if it's possible, if it's okay for us, for our environment. How about SQL Server browser? By default, SQL Server browser is disabled. It's good or not? It's good, yes. How often we need SQL Server browser? Yeah, generally, if we have a lot of instances of the same machine and we want to connect from somewhere to this machine, we need SQL Server browser. But if we have dedicated SQL Server, we don't need SQL Server browser because we have only if we have only one instance, we don't need a SQL Server browser. So we can disable if we don't need. Securing service accounts. So different service accounts for different services, of course. Dedicated low privileges domain accounts. So just the standard user by default for all of the accounts which we use for the different SQL Server services. And next, assign the roles or permissions for separate accounts. Again, how about strong passwords? We should use the strong passwords if it's possible. And we should create a good plan and make notes about the service accounts and passwords. For example, if we create seven or eight accounts by default, is if we have, for example, SQL Server Enterprise, and we use different accounts for different services, we need about 8 accounts. 8 different accounts with 8 different passwords. So it's good to make in the notes for this passwords. Security. Okay, part of demo. It should work, I hope. Okay. I will see just this screen and my screen. Okay. So, just simple example, yes? When we have an account, so after installing SQL Server and we have SA account, we can change the name for any different names for the account. So if someone from the, for example, attackers asking our environment about the SA account, they will not get any answers because the SA account will not exist from the outside. Yeah? So we can change, for example, like this one, okay? Okay, so here, for example. So I use cloud. Okay. So for example, we can change our SA account. And we will have, of course, different name here. Yes, okay, logins. Say refresh. Yeah, and this account now is SA account, but its name is different. Okay. Of course, remove built-in administrator Windows account from build it inside our Windows environment. Of course. Here is the. Okay. Don't see that. Okay. Revoke guest access, but I want to show you about the store procedures, so the limited of the store procedures which have a public access for store procedures. So I hope that it will work. Yes, and as you see, 1442 store procedures we have by default on our SQL Server environment, and all of the store procedures have a public permission access. So it's good to know which kind of store procedures we should change. Not all, of course, but we can check on our environment which kind of store procedures have this account. Okay, this public access. Any questions? Yeah. Yes. Yes. SQL Server 14 security enhancement. Why the SQL Server 14? Of course, because it's the new SQL Server and it's most compatible now with the SQL Azure databases. So transparent data encryption. How many of you use TDA? Transparent data encryption. One person, yes? For securing data, specific kind of data, maybe sensitive data. It works, okay? Yes, okay. So we can use transparent data encryption not only for the standard securing our data, but with SQL Server 2014, we can use transparent data encryption for backup. So new functionality looks like that takes non-encrypted backup data, encrypt data before writing to the disk. Compression is performed on the backup data field. So first is the compression, next is the encryption of our backup, and encryption is applied to the compressed data, and of course we can send our data directly to the Azure blob storage from SQL Server 2014 and 2012 SP1 cumulative update 2, if I remember well. If you use the backup have you ever tried to send backup directly to the Azure or to the blob storage? How it works, in your opinion? It works, yeah? It's good or not? It's tricky. Yeah, it's okay, yeah? Normally we use disk to tape or something like that, this kind of backup. Now we can send our data directly to the Azure, and it's really good, especially that the pushing data inside the Azure is free. We pay just for the storage. But how often we restore data from the backup? How often did you restore data from backup? Daily? And from Azure too? No. Because downloading data from Azure is costly. In some of the, we pay for the downloading data. So of course it's the different. If we look for the money, of course it's important. Another new functionality, encryption key management. So encryption options include encryption algorithms and certificate or asymmetric key. Only asymmetric key reside in encryption key management. And we can use multiple algorithms up to IS-256, which are supported in encryption key management. If you encrypt your data, which kind of algorithm are you use? Yeah, okay. So we can manage, of course, by PowerShell, management objects, T-SQL, and of course, Management Studio. It's very, very important that asymmetric key or certificate must be backup up, and location must be different than backup location, because we have no chance to restore data if we not have asymmetric key or certificates. If you ever try to play with the encryption with this data without certificates or asymmetric key, we have no chance for restoring data. So it's very important if you start to play with TDA, please remember about the backup of this data. Three new options. Connect any database permissions. It's the new server level permission for SQL Server 2014. It grants connect any database to a login that must connect to all currently databases exist and new in the future. Does not grant any permission in the database beyond connect, so just only this kind of databases which are connected now. And we can allow, of course, auditing processing to view all data in our database statement. So for example, select user, securables, or view server state. So it's the new permission for SQL Server 2014. Another one is impersonate any login. Is anyone use impersonation in SQL Server? Very useful, yes? Run as someone. Here we can use run as login. So we can put under login we can have anything generally. So it's the new server level permission. When granted, impersonate any login allows middle tier process to impersonate the account clients to connecting it. So it's very new, very good functionality. When denied impersonate any login, a high privileges login can be blocked from the impersonating other login. So it's another good point. The third new permissions is select all user securables. So when we granted select all user securables to a login, we can view data in our databases that the user can connect. So we can use this functionality, for example, if someone auditing our data. If we use the auditing, for example, external auditor came to our company for auditing, we can use this permission for giving access for the view, the same data as some of the users can see. So it's very good options. SQL Server Express. How many of you works with SQL Express? Yeah? For which reason? Just for testing or is for production systems? Yeah, sometimes we use in some of the application. Yes, it's like another SQL Server application. If we use, for example, SQL Server Express with some of the application like Semantic or something, we should remember about the securing this instance too, because it's another instance. So we should remember about the instance name. By default is SQL Express. We should remember about network protocoling and, of course, SQL Server Browser, which are disabled by default. And we can use user local instances, so we can run the instance as a normal users without accessing for the high privileges. So it's very good functionality for the local databases. How about the cloud? How much you trust the clouds? No trust. No trusting. How about Azure? How many of you trust the Azure systems? One person here, yeah, the second one. This person is not important. Because, yeah, okay. Why you trust Azure? Huh. It's good platform. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many of you use Google? Gmail accounts, Windows Live accounts, something like that. Everything is the cloud, yes? Dropbox, Evernote, OneNote Online, or something like that. Everything is the cloud. So we generally use the clouds from many, many years. If you have an email account, probably the email account is stored somewhere in the cloud, if it's just external account, not the company. So the cloud security for Azure, it works really, really great. So Microsoft Cloud Security approach. So this team, this group, create the principles, patterns, and practices. They have a security engineering team. They work with the securing the network, host, and application. They provide the scenarios and solutions for the application security. They provide security frame, work with the people, and so on and so on. We remember about the accounts, login like a SA, system administrator, and so on. How it works in the cloud. How is anyone work with the, okay, one person I'm sure. How many of you work with SQL Azure or with the Azure now? You just testing or working with the production? Production, yes? So what is your experience with that? So if you work with the production, you trust the Azure, yes? A little bit.
A little bit, but yeah, I trust it completely. I mean,
it's not okay, it's not important. Yeah, it's the part of production, but it's not the important production, yes? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so security model. Uses regular SQL security model, authenticate logins map to users and roles, authorize users and roles to SQL objects, of course, support for standard SQL authorization logins, and of course, username and passwords. I found on the Microsoft white papers 1 year ago that security model is 100% compatible with SQL Server on premise. Do you think that it's true or not? Windows logins, yes. Yes. You can use, for example, Active Directory, and you can use the Active Directory through your application to connect to Azure systems, not only SQL Server Database, but generally for Azure systems. Not all. Not in all cases. And of course, it's not the same systems like systems on premise. I remember an interview with the CEO of the Microsoft in Poland, Microsoft branch in Poland. A few years ago, he said in the interview that he believed that the SQL Azure platform will be, the people will understand that it's not a replacement for the SQL Server on premise. It's just another application, another systems which provide you new functionality, but it's not for replacement for standard system on premise. So of course, it was 3 years ago. As we see, everything is changing, especially in the Azure platform. But with the security point of view, you cannot use admin, administrator, guest, root, or SA accounts. They are forbidden in Azure, especially in the SQL Azure like a platform as a service. So it's better than SQL Server on-premise or worse? In my opinion, it's better because Microsoft remember about some of the accounts which are dangerous generally because they can be hacked. So you cannot use these accounts for working with SQL Azure. Security requirements for Azure platform. Of course, a lot of data centers, North America, Asia, Europe, Japan, Oceania, a lot of them. And they are very, very big data centers. Some of them support government applications, just for government, especially in the United States. Another security requirements. ISO 27 certification. How many of you are connected with ISO 27000? What is this kind of certification? It's for sensitive data. If you have a sensitive data inside your company, for example, human resources data, and you have an outsourcing company, you must pass the certification for security. SOC compliance, Cloud Security Alliance, for example, and payment card industry, PCI DSS, level 1. And of course, it's changing month by month because Microsoft trying to pass all of the requirements which are necessary. So here is the list of the examples of the Microsoft certification for the Azure platform. So if we look for this, we generally have a lot of certifications, more than any data center which I know. I work for the last 10 years in data centers, and in Poland we have maybe 1 or 2 data centers now which pass half of them. And here is the certification for the Microsoft data centers. And of course, we have more. Depends on the countries, because it's something for Australia, something for United Kingdom, something for China, and so on and so on. Another point about the security for Azure platform. About keeping a data, it's especially for the ISO 27000. It's accredited for storage, tables, blob queues, SQL databases, HD Insight, and virtual machines, and Active Directory, for example. So just for specific features which are available inside the Azure platform. And of course, the last one, I hope, physical requirements. Are physical requirements important for you? It's easy to go inside your company if I am, for example, outsider and I not work in your company. It's possible that I can go inside your data center room? No? How about social networking techniques? Nothing? Maybe not. But many times it works. I remember one case from my company. We had a special guest. He said that he's from a service provider, and he wanted to enter to the data center room, and he was on the door on the data center room, and someone remembered that he should check again this person, and this person was not from the service, but it was from the auditors from one of our customers. So sometimes someone can try to access, for example, for our data center. And of course, it's not possible for going to Microsoft Azure data centers. About the compatibility with Azure and SQL Server on-premise. So with compare of SQL Server 2005, we have a non-compatibility with the, for example, CLR, database mirroring, service broker, table partitioning, and part of the XML. how much compatibility is important if you want to move your data from SQL Server on-premise environment to the clouds? How much compatibility is important? If you migrate your data, for example, from old SQL Server environment to the new, have you checked the compatibility? So, from my perspective, the parts of non-compatibility are important because we can find some of the information which features we cannot use, for example, on SQL Azure in compare of SQL Server on-premise. So here is the database mirroring. We have no time, of course, for talking why we have this non-compatibility. This functionality doesn't work on SQL Azure, but not all. For example, data auditing. You can use data auditing in the newest version of V12 with the preview portal. So you can use part of the auditing for SQL Server in the cloud. We cannot use extended events yet, but it will be probably possible in this year. We still cannot use policy-based management, and we cannot use transparent data encryption. So if we use the TDA as natural, you cannot put directly data inside the SQL Azure, like a platform. But yes, if you encrypt data because you have some of the sensitive data, so you probably will not want to move to this kind of cloud. And with SQL Server 2008 R2, just SQL Server Utility, SQL Server Shell Provider, and Master Data Services. And it's important, if you start to work with the clouds, you should use as newest version of the tools as possible because they are prepared and produced just for the better compatibility with Azure. For example, SQL Server Management Studio minimum should be for SQL Server 2008 R2, but for SQL Server 14 is much, much better because some of the implementation are inside the Management Studio. And the same with the Visual Studio. The best option now is Visual Studio Community Preview, the latest one, the number 15, of course. Some of the demo. Let's try. Okay. Try to connect for all of my instances. Yes, I have 17 instances. So 15 are on my physical machine, and 2 instances are in the cloud now. And, okay. Yeah. How often you check the login with the specific permissions? How often you auditing your databases? Yeah? So we can use, for example, this kind of procedure to checking the logins with connect permissions. I probably have one login somewhere in my databases which have the connect permission. Check. So this is one of the example of the incompatibility. So this statement is not supported to switch between databases because inside this query, I connected some data between databases, and some of the statements, some of the store procedures are not compatible with the SQL Azure. So it's important if you want to work with the clouds to check which kind of T-SQL statements, which kind of store procedure are non-compatible, because probably you cannot use this, like in this example. So because I ask all of my instances, so now I'll check again just for my physical instances on my laptop. I can check all. It probably will have one of the result. Yes, I have one account which have a granted permission for connect to the databases, and I remember well that this account is the guest account. So it's the worst case scenario because it's the guest account. So the guest account can connect to this instance from anywhere and do something, because connection to the server is possible, of course, based on the privileges. Another one point, how often you check the weak passwords for the users? Have you ever checked this? Auditing? Yes, sometimes yes. So again, we can check the weak passwords. So I see that I have two accounts, two logins with the very, very weak password. It's not weak password. It's the standard secure Microsoft passwords. Because it's all of the rules for the strong password is with the password. What is the name of novice user? Do you remember? SA. SA have a very simple password. So any hackers just use the standard methodology for trying this. Yes. So it's one of the example of yeah.
What is the hashing algorithm for passwords?
Yes, the hashing algorithm we can use. For example, in this case, we have a PWD compare statement procedure. This procedure is not supported on Azure. If we want to use this, we can use hash algorithms, and we can find a workaround how to work with hash algorithms to find the passwords. Yeah, and it works.
But internally, what is actually used? How fast is it to make a directory attack? MD5, but is it SAH1 with 256 or?
Yeah, I don't know how fast is it. I have no. I don't.
Way to change it. For example, I would use bcrypt instead for storing SQL passwords.
I don't know now. I don't remember, actually. Yeah. Okay, but we can talk about this. Yeah, you can check some points. Yes, of course. Okay, and what more? Summary. So short summary with the SQL Server security in the cloud. So the same security principles like SQL Server on-premise, almost the same, except some of the non-compability things, like, for example, transparent encryption, or maybe some of the T-SQL statements, which are not compatible, or some store procedures and functions which are not supported in SQL Server. If we want to work with the SQL in the cloud and we need to full supported services, full supported store procedures, which way we can use? Instead of SQL Azure, we can use virtual machine with the inside the Azure, and everything will work on the Azure machine, of course. Full responsibility for DBA with virtual machine because it's just the virtual machine, similar like machine in our environment. If we work with the SQL Azure data, with Azure SQL databases, there is the partial responsibility because SQL Azure databases is, for example, updated automatically by Microsoft team. So the partial management of this is on the Microsoft side. So we work with some of the part of the management is not for us. The Microsoft do that. And it's automatic updates for SQL Azure databases. New functionality implemented by Microsoft very, very often. We can see probably today on the keynote, you hear something. I have not been on keynote, but maybe Nigel Ellis announced some of the new features which will be soon inside the Azure. or maybe they are now in the version 12 preview on Azure, and new functionality comes day by day, week by week. Incompatibilities we know, and increased security by default. So the security is better because, for example, the accounts, some of the accounts are forbidden to use on SQL on Azure. The difference between Windows Azure's SQL databases and virtual machines, we can choose, depends on our business, we can choose Azure databases or SQL Server in Azure machine, virtual machine. Depends on which kind of compatibility we need, which kind of environment we have, what level of security is important for us, for example, with auditing, with encryption, and so on. And at the end, I found some of the links for you. So I hope that those links will be interesting for you if you want to know more about the compatibilities, about the security with the clouds and SQL Server inside the Azure environment. Some of the best practices, about Azure Trust Security. It's a very good tool, SQL Server Best Practice Analysis. How many of you use this? Is anyone who uses SQL Server Best Practice Analyzer? Yes. We can use this for, the latest version is for SQL Server 2012, and we can run this on our environment and check, for example, the security, check the passwords, complex of the passwords, check the logins, check the accounts, and many other things with the best practices for the SQL Server. We can use Microsoft Security Assessment Tool, for example, and threat analysis and modeling tools, some other tools which help us for working with the security, improving our security. And other links and special resources. So documents, white papers from Microsoft, and not only about the security best practices, Azure network security, and management, and more and more. Yes. Some of the two important things. Another examples not connected with the SQL Server, but connected with the security. And any questions? We're going to the end of my session. What is the national security? What it could be? So, if you have any questions, ask me nicely. Okay, contact for me after session. And thank you very much. If you have questions, maybe I will find the answers. And of course, explore everything with PASS, like other events, other SQL user group, virtual chapters, PASS Summit, and all other things. Thank you very much.